Welcome to all maesters, historians, and researchers of the Seven Kingdoms. This is Westeros Chronicles. Today, we are launching a massive project, a deep dive into the very first book that started it all, A Game of Thrones. But before we fly to Winterfell, we need to understand the world where this story was born. With me, as always, is Alex. Alex, are you ready to open the Forbidden Scrolls?
I've been ready since the long night, Max. You know what's fascinating is that this whole epic didn't start with a map or a king, but with a feeling of deep creative frustration. It's 1991, and George R.R. Martin is working in Hollywood. He's a successful screenwriter for shows like Beauty and the Beast, but he's dying inside because every time he writes a grand scene, producers tell him, "George, this is too big. We don't have the budget for 10,000 extras or 5 dragons. Cut it down to a conversation between 2 people in a small room."
It's a classic story of creative rebellion. Martin decided to write a story so massive, so complex, and so expensive that no studio would ever dare to touch it. He wanted to return to the pure, limitless freedom of prose. And it all started with a single vivid image that flashed in his mind. A summer snowstorm, the execution of a man who saw something he shouldn't have, and a group of children finding direwolf pups in the freezing woods. That one scene contains the DNA of the entire series, the brutal reality of survival and the transition from a dying summer to an unpredictable, magical winter. This wasn't just a book. It was Martin reclaiming his right to be a world builder without a budget. It's about the legal and social collapse of a world that has forgotten its past.
And that brings us to the most iconic structure in all of fantasy, the Wall. In the first book, Jon Snow sees it for the first time as a giant block of ice, a marvel of ancient engineering. But lore-wise, it's so much more than a border. It's 8,000 years old, 700 feet high, and it stretches for 300 miles. But Max, the real question isn't how they built it, but why it's still standing. Physics tells us ice shouldn't hold its shape like that for millennia under its own weight. It should have deformed or melted long ago. There is something fundamentally wrong with the physics of Westeros.
Exactly. Brandon the Builder didn't just use water and blocks of stone. He used blood, sweat, and spells. Lore suggests the children of the forest wove ancient magic into its very foundations. It's a literal magical filter. When we see the others in the prologue, they don't just walk through the woods. They glide like shadows. They are the antithesis of everything warm and living. The Wall is a vibrating barrier, humming with a frequency that keeps that frozen intelligence at bay. In A Game of Thrones, we start to see that the Night's Watch has forgotten this. They think they are guarding against wildlings, but the Wall knows it was built for something much colder and much older. It's a legal contract with the earth itself that is starting to expire.
Speaking of forgotten things, let's talk about the Starks. Their words, "winter is coming," are unique among the great houses. Every other family boasts about their strength, their wealth, or their loyalty. "Hear me roar, growing strong, family, duty, honor." But the Starks? Their words are a grim, legalistic warning. It's not a boast, it's a mission statement. It's a reminder that the balance of the world is fragile. And then we have the crypts of Winterfell. Max, as we see in the first book, the crypts aren't just a graveyard. Why is there such a strong emphasis on the iron swords resting on the laps of the stone statues? What are they afraid of?
The crypts are arguably the most mysterious location in the lore. There are levels deeper than any living Stark has visited, caves that predate the castle itself. The iron swords are there specifically to keep the vengeful spirits of the old kings of winter inside their tombs. In the first book, both Bran and Rickon have matching prophetic dreams about their father in the crypts. There is a psychic link between the Starks and the very earth of the north. They aren't just lords appointed by a king. They are the Kings of Winter, a title that carries a weight of responsibility to the old magic of the first men. When a Stark says winter is coming, they are essentially saying, we are the shield. If a Stark is not in Winterfell, the magic begins to fade.
Now, let's cross the narrow sea to Daenerys Targaryen. Her journey in A Game of Thrones is a masterclass in character evolution. She starts as a literal commodity, sold by her brother Viserys like a piece of property to Khal Drogo. But then she receives the 3 dragon eggs. At the start of the book, these eggs are considered stone, cold, and dead. The world thinks magic is gone, that dragons died out 150 years ago. But the ending of the first book is the big bang of the series. Max, let's talk about the specific price of that miracle. It wasn't a reward for being good, was it?
Absolutely not. It was only death can pay for life. This is the dark, inescapable alchemy of Martin's world. To hatch those eggs, Daenerys had to lose everything. Her husband, her unborn son, and her own innocence. She had to sacrifice the Meiji Miri Mazdur. This wasn't a Disney moment. It was a blood sacrifice. When those 3 dragons hatched, the metaphysical temperature of the world changed instantly. We find out later that the glass candles in Old Town started burning again. The return of the dragons in the east is the direct counterpart to the others waking in the north. Fire and ice are waking up at the same time, and the human Game of Thrones is suddenly caught in the middle of a cosmic shift they don't even understand.
It's a global reset of the rules. And while Dany is waking dragons, Ned Stark is in King's Landing, trying to solve a murder mystery using a code of honor that belongs to a different age. But his most important contribution to the lore isn't his political struggle. It's his memory of the Tower of Joy, a battle of 7 against 3. Max, as someone who studies combat, that fight is legendary. Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning, against Ned Stark and his companions. From a tactical perspective, why did Arthur Dayne lose?
Tactically, Ned's team should have won easily through numbers, but Arthur Dayne was the peak of Westerosi martial excellence. He wielded Dawn, a sword forged from the heart of a fallen star. Dayne's combat style was about absolute precision, perfect distance control, and a flow state, principles that any elite martial artist today would recognize. He wasn't fighting for glory. Tactically, Ned's team should have won easily through numbers, but Arthur Dayne was the peak of Westerosi martial excellence. He wielded Dawn, a sword forged from the heart of a fallen star. Dayne's combat style was about absolute precision, perfect distance control, and a flow state, principles that any elite martial artist today would recognize. He wasn't fighting for glory. He was guarding a future. The Kingsguard weren't at the Trident with the prince. They were in a remote tower in Dorne. They were guarding the birth of the 3rd head of the dragon. This is where the R+L=J theory is born. It wasn't a war for a woman. It was a war to protect a specific bloodline that Rhaegar believed was necessary for the survival of humanity against the Great Other.
Exactly. Rhaegar Targaryen wasn't just a prince who ran away with a girl. He was a lore obsessive. He read something in his scrolls as a youth that changed him. He believed his lineage was the song of ice and fire. He was trying to engineer a prophecy. Jon Snow, growing up as a bastard in Winterfell, is the result of that desperate attempt to bridge the gap between the magic of the North and the fire of the South. But Ned Stark carried that secret to his grave to protect the child from Robert Baratheon's legal wrath.
And finally, we have to mention the Weirwoods, the old gods. In the first book, Catelyn Stark looks at the heart tree in Winterfell and feels an alien, cold presence. She's from the South, a follower of the Seven, and she sees the world through a legalistic human lens. But the Weirwoods, they are a living network. They are the eyes of the earth. Every vow made in front of those red leaves is recorded in a biological database. When Ned Stark prays in the Godswood, he isn't just finding peace. He is unknowingly connecting to a network that spans thousands of years. Through Bran, we will eventually see how this network allows the past to be a living part of the present. It's the ultimate evidence for any maester.
It's like the ancient world's version of a global consciousness, and it's only waking up because winter is coming. The first book sets the stage perfectly. The politics of Cersei and Robert are the noise, but the wall, the dragons, and the Weirwoods are the signal. One is temporary, a game played by people who will soon be forgotten. The other is eternal, a struggle for the very existence of life on the continent. The tragedy of the first book is that the only man who could have bridged these two worlds, Ned Stark, is removed from the board because he didn't understand that the laws of men no longer applied.
Well said, Alex. A Game of Thrones isn't just an introduction. It's a legal and magical warning. The rules of the world are changing, and most of the players are too busy fighting over scraps to notice the blizzard on the horizon. Next time, we'll see how the continent begins to bleed as we dive into the total chaos of a clash of kings. We'll look at the legal legitimacy of the 5 kings and the tactical brilliance of the Blackwater.
I can't wait. We'll be talking about shadow assassins, green fire, and the true meaning of power. Thanks for joining us on this journey through the archives of Westeros. Keep your swords sharp, your minds open, and always remember, winter is truly coming. See you in the next chapter.